Therapists of Reddit. What was your biggest "I know I'm not supposed to judge you, but holy shit" moment? Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week she cancelled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an OGI, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone. I'm super extroverted and the struggle in 2020 is real. I just spend a lot of time on Discord chatting to people. Amazingly, I haven't caught COVID. Just out of curiosity, did you attend orgies before COVID? Is extroverted a way of saying you're into orgies? Shrestroverted. I work with youth and adolescents who have anxiety, trauma, and/or depression. Some of the kids I worked with had some pretty severe attachment issues. Regardless of this, I never thought I'd have to seriously explain. You can't just buy a straitjacket for your kid, feeding your kid ultra-spicy ramen each night instead of the meal everyone else is eating isn't specifically defined as abuse. But you have to understand the emotional abuse that this causes. Your kid isn't trying to kill you because they stand in your doorway at night crying. That's likely because they're scared of their traumatic nightmares, but feel like you will just yell at them if they wake you up. Clinical psychologist working primarily in forensics here. This means my clients are usually involved in legal proceedings, family court, juvenile court, criminal court, etc. My job is usually to evaluate or provide treatment. I'm not there to judge. That's the judge's job. But of course I have my thoughts. I'm usually impressed by the justifications people make for shitty behavior. The one that irks me the most is when parents manipulate their child against the other parent. I've had to do therapy for a 5-year-old who said she doesn't want to see a parent because they haven't paid child support. Excuse me, what 5-year-old knows, understand, or needs to be worried about child support? I got my father accusing my mother of turning me and my siblings against him. We were 14-year-old, 9-year-old and 7-year-old at the time, and never acknowledged that he was the one doing all kind of shooty things to us. We had 8 years of pure pain with social assistance. We got fricked by familiarist CPS who only thought about the good for the family. I'm kinda sensible to this argument, as it has been using against me, my siblings and my mother. CPS fricked me too as a kid, not wanting to split up the family after me and my sister told them the emotional and mental abuse our father put us through. Frick CPS. Exactly. So many of us have been absolutely fricked in the ass by CPS. I remember my grandma called CPS several times when I lived with my mum and stepdad. But because it was mostly psychological abuse and neglect, they didn't give a shoot. One day my grandma was just like frick it and picked me up from there, and I haven't gone back since. When I was underage, I got caught with a drink on Bourbon Street and got a minor in possession. I was telling my therapist about it, and said that the police caught me with a hand grenade in New Orleans. He didn't realize that a hand grenade was a type of drink, and it was funny to watch him try to process that his patient might have just casually told him that he had been caught with a fragmentation grenade. He took a big long pause, and said, "Where did you even find a grenade?" I realized the misunderstanding quickly and corrected him, but for a moment he definitely was thinking, holy shoot, how do I deal with this? I work in mental health and have worked in acute and crisis settings for the majority of my career. The most notable event I experienced was when a young person had presented with significant ongoing suicidal ideation who was dealing with a lot of shoot. I spent a lot of time with them, mostly de-escalation and working out what the plan should be moving forward. One of their parents came in a little while later and I had the opportunity to speak to them about where their child was and what had been going on. With their consent, of course. Midway through me trying to explain some of the psychological constructs and ways the parent could help, they said to me, "Is this going to take much longer? I have a show to go and watch." All I can say is, I never judge my patients. I have never walked their path or viewed the world through their eyes, but the people around them who perpetuate the suffering of the people I work with through ignorance, malice and selfishness, I judge them. Wow. Some people just shouldn't have kids. 100%. Not everyone is made to be a parent. Yeah, that's apparent. Some parents just shouldn't have become parents in the first place if this is how much they value their own kids' happiness. Some people really are ignorant when it comes to mental health, and that's something I'll judge. Sometimes, I just don't understand. Why did they have kids? Like, why? What was the point? Peer pressure. Accident. Children aren't emotionless slaves. They're human beings. Therapist here. To piggyback on what others have said, it is highly unlikely for me to have moments where I judge my clients. It happens sometimes, but I'm able to shut down those thoughts quickly in my head and return to being present for the people I see. People are so incredibly complex that my judgment wouldn't have any meaning anyway, and it doesn't have a place in our work together. I will admit though, something that does get me feeling a little salty is when I have a client's parent that attempts to sabotage the therapeutic relationship I have with their child, or pulling them out of therapy entirely when some of the things we talk about challenges some potentially unhealthy family dynamics. I don't feel anger toward the parents. Mostly I feel bad for the kid. My God, it's like you're describing my mother. She let me go to therapy a grand total of 2 times while I was depressed and suicidal at 17. The second time, the therapist asked her to come in to talk to her about how I was feeling, and she started crying to him about how my feelings made her feel sad and how much it affected her. I never even cried in my sessions. Then he told her she might like to consider letting me go out with friends more and have a better social life, and then she took me home and told me I manipulated him into saying that to her. A few weeks later, I tried to commit suicide, and her response was to take me out of therapy and off the medication, because in her mind that was what caused my episode and not her and my father being pricks to me. During my training, I was asked, how would you feel if a client were to come to you and admitted they were a pedophile that was on the edge of committing seriously horrific acts? Could you see that person as another human being that needed help? Or were your personal feelings about the abhorrent behavior too strong? This factor led some people to not continue my course on to the next level, but it really illustrates the level of non-judgment needed in this field. We all have our own personal feelings, of course, but these get talked about in supervision. Genuine question, because I'm not a therapist, but I've been to so many, and the first thing everyone says is something like everything is confidential between us. But if you're in danger of hurting yourself or another person, I have to report it. If a pedophile says they are on the edge of acting on their urges, don't you have to intervene? Yes. All instances of harm to the client or others need to be passed on to the relevant authorities. This is made clear during the initial meeting with the client. As you have said, pedophiles are a great example for whether you're cut out for this field or not. I've thought a lot about this and have worked with a few, but was able to view them as people having severe psychiatric troubles from trauma they've endured. That being said, the people I worked with were expressing extreme remorse. I know that working in this area could never be my specialty, and I refer clients out, because I would have to work through too much of my own feelings about their actions. Not a judgment. You kind of train your brain not to judge, because you are seeking to understand and help. When you do those things, you can't simultaneously judge. We could all use a little more of that in real life, I suppose. I'll share this though. I do feel concerned about this recent phenomenon of young people I worked with self-diagnosing, sharing, and identifying very closely with mental illness, as if the pendulum quickly swung from never, ever share your feelings to oh my God, you're depressed. All of us are, to life's challenges can be tough, and they don't need a scientific sounding label to be valid and real. You are not your diagnosis. We can find validation and support in healthier ways. I agree. I have 2 clients that constantly look up NPD videos on YouTube and label everyone an arc. That type of black and white thinking takes a long time to work through. I agree. I love that people are more open to getting help. But there's also a big problem with labeling normal ups and downs of life as anxiety and depression among some college students I work with. My main concern with that is how quickly people can seek medication to numb the ups and downs, instead of working through them. And the bigger concern, how quickly medication is given. I've also had a ton of young people coming to me self-diagnosing as having borderline personality disorder, which is incredibly complex, and a lot of therapists wouldn't feel comfortable diagnosing it in a young person to begin with. Okay, real therapist here. I got one. Some of my clients are shockingly bad at giving themselves credit. Holy shoot. Like they might get a nearly straight A GPA in a brutal major while battling depression, or overcome years of phobia and get behind the wheel again, or write a literal novel, or raise a kid as a single parent with low income, or build new relationships after being burned, or cope with OCD well enough to hold down a job. And they'll talk about themselves, as if everyone on earth is better than them, as if their accomplishments are worthless. And I know it's because of depression or anxiety or another condition, but I'm often stunned by how differently I see them compared to how they see themselves. This has me in tears, because my therapist just had me write myself a forgiveness letter. I lost my wife and I'm a single father, and I wasn't acknowledging that my grieving is just different than our societal expectations, and instead of criticizing it, I should tend to it. I also let these judgments affect my personality at times and led to it being put on others on occasion, which I took time to make amends with those that I felt I wronged. So, I wrote a letter to myself, as if I was writing to my best friend, and I was shocked as I wrote it at the amount of kindness and forgiveness I would have given him. He could have done almost anything in his grief, and I would have loved him and waited for him to return to the best version of himself. Heavy shoot coming out of that one.